This Finance and Property Committee to order. First item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Public comment? Nobody has approached me. Public comment? All right, if not, we will move on to item 5A1. Approval of temporary and utility easement for arterial utility access to 201 River Drive property. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you'll recall, this actually was, it's a new incarnation of a previous request for a utility easement that was brought before this committee earlier this year. The original proposal was affecting our 210 River Drive property and would have required some underground access and construction. The committee at that time felt that if we're potentially selling that property, it wouldn't be in the county's best interest to encumber the property with additional easements. So the company came back with an altered proposal. This proposal is simply to utilize existing aerial poles to establish the same access to the building that's currently occupied by the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce. And there would be no underground access or easement applied. It would simply be an easement for aerial utility access. So that's the request before you now is does the committee want to approve an aerial utility easement to allow the access to that Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce for the utility work by TDS?
So it is a TDS request for the purposes of serving the Chamber of Commerce offices.
That is correct.
So we're aware. Are there any questions of, like, Kurt?
But there's already an existing easement on utilities.
Please, you, microphone.
So there's currently an existing easement on current utilities that are currently strung on that aerial poles.
That's correct. There just isn't one for TDS to access.
Any questions or motions? What are your wishes, Chair Gibbs?
Make a motion to approve the temporary utility easement for aerial utilities access to at 201 River Drive property.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. All right. We will move on to broadband. I think I know a little bit about this one. So we have, if you could scroll down on the map, I guess I can, why don't I just go over there?
Okay.
Because I'll know which ones to go to. Highlight some things. Right now, based upon Public Service Commission estimates, we have approximately 15,000 people that are unserved, which means they're below 25.3, underserved below 120, and no coverage. And we've been attempting, thank you. We've been attempting to address those. In one of the areas that we've targeted is the former Rural Digital Opportunity Fund area that was going to be covered by LTE broadband out of Minnesota. The FCC had a reverse auction where they identified census tracts that were underserved, and they basically invited internet service providers to bid on what subsidy they needed, and the lowest subsidy rate was awarded. Nationwide, LTD was awarded $1.3 billion worth of projects. They were a relatively small company in Minnesota, and after it was the largest recipient of preliminary awards by the FCC. FCC said, you don't have the financial capacity to do it, therefore we're revoking your approval. Unfortunately, it took them several months to over a year to do that, which means that the area in orange on the map was their proposed service area, and it left that area outside of eligibility for many of the other funding sources through the Public Service Commission or through the use of ARPA dollars. So we targeted that area. The area in green was awarded to Spectrum. Spectrum, or Charter Communication, was the number 2 awardee nationwide at about $1.2 billion. And they've been actually doing a pretty good job of covering it in. This is a map. The white area represents the area that Charter is working on. White is where they're complete and offering service. Yellow will be completed this year, and blue will be completed over the next couple of years. And we've got some information in there. I'm going to quickly run through this. This map reflects where Frontier was awarded a PSC grant last year to serve about 10,600 homes in the county. That factors into the discussion later today. But we had 2 proposals come forward, or 2 companies bring proposals to us. One was Charter, and Charter is looking at basically filling in on that ARPA or that RDOF map this one. The area in here, which is Reeprock, Ween, Rib Falls, and a portion of town of Castle, and then a portion of town of Spencer, McMillan, Ween, and Green Valley on the south. They're putting forth 2 different proposals on those areas, and their application is strengthened by partnering with local governments and others. Frontier is looking at the Village of Maine, down in town of Spencer, so there's some overlap between the proposals from Charter and Frontier. The Public Service Commission will only pick one, and then Emmett, a portion of Emmett would be served. Those were in the the LTD broadband service area. So Charter, these are some earlier numbers. They're looking at approximately a $15 million project. They're putting in $7.6 million and seeking a subsidy of $7 million between the PSC and the county for Project 1. Project 2, we don't have updated complete cost. They revised that project to reflect when they originally proposed it. They covered some of the areas that were funded through Frontier in last year's grant in that yellow in that southeast corner. So they went back in and re-engineered it and came up, and they revised the number from 2,604 locations to 6,000 or 2,000 in, I believe, 16 position or passings. And we don't their project costs. They'll be asking for about 48. They're asking for subsidy for 48% of the cost, and they're paying for 52. Frontier, we don't have the numbers, exact numbers yet. They've revised those, but they're at 846 passings total. The broadband task force met yesterday, and we've been delaying the meetings because these plans have been revised over and over again to reduce. If Charter had submitted one, they would have been covering the same area that was funded last year. They would have been open for challenges, which would have jeopardized their ability to be funded. The Public Service Commission's deadline is next Tuesday. So we need to act tonight as both a Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee and as a county board if we're going to do it. The broadband task force supports both projects, and the thought was that the PSE can arbitrate which one is stronger in those areas. The level of subsidy, there's a significant difference in level of subsidy being requested between Frontier and Charter. That will go into the scoring. I think PSC has a lower subsidy rate. The Broadband Task Force, in an effort to strengthen both applications, offered $100 per passing in support out of the ARPA program. Last year, we committed at a $235 per passing rate. The $100 is closer to the average that we have spent between 2020 and today. There were some projects where we didn't provide any subsidy, others where Serenity, we've been at $870 per passing because it's a smaller project, and we were trying to get funding. But so the recommendation for you today is to support both projects, partner with them, commit or pledge, not commit, pledge $100 per crossing to a successful applicant. They then have 2 years from the date of entering into an agreement to complete the work. So there's a timeline for them to do it. And that's what came out of the Broadband Task Force. Infrastructure earlier today unanimously recommended that it be approved. And again, I apologize for the tight timeline, but we are really dependent upon the internet service providers. Christy.
On the resolution, it doesn't have revenue replacement, and if you do it under the broadband, there's an extreme amount of information and details on maps that have to be forwarded to the U.S. Treasury. And so I would just ask that you add revenue recovery as an option under the resolution too.
And where would that go?
One of the last paragraphs. The very last paragraph, it just mentions that it's pursuant to expenditure categories 5.16 and 5.17. It would also be and 6.1.
So, Michael, you're nodding in concurrence that that needs to be added?
I think that would make a lot of sense.
Can you draft that so we can present that later?
Yes. It's drafted.
And the vice chair of the Broadband Task Force is here too, and Jerry Klein, who's been working on this. Other questions? If not, Supervisor Lemmer.
Lemmer, yep. It says in here not to exceed 495.1 whatever. Anyway, $495,000. Is that for both projects?
That's for all. There's actually 5 projects. Each of Charter's, the 2 projects are separate, and Frontier has 3 separate projects. But the total is based upon crossings. So we will only pay, and there is some duplication in there, but we put the number as if everything was funded in there for a fiscal note. We will know probably early 2024 which projects are funded, and then we will rescind the approval as we've done in the past. We will rescind the approval for the others. At one time, we had put $3 million into broadband expansion out of ARPA. We walked that back because we hadn't spent it or encumbered it. We didn't want to get caught where all of a sudden we had all of these funds that were unencumbered. So we're now recapturing. We basically let go $1.7 million plus back out of that $3 million. So we're now looking at it. I think the anticipation is that with the BEAD, the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program, there's $42.5 billion available nationwide. There's $1.055 billion that's coming into Wisconsin. Those grants will be rolling out. There will be match requirements, so we'll want to be positioned to try to advance those. We won't go back to the entire $3 million, but we'll have to come back to the board when we've got those applications and projects before us. Again, the ARPA dollars have an encumbrance deadline of of December 31st of 24 and expense deadline of December 31st of 2026. So we can't be approving projects beyond those times. And in the public hearings and public meetings that we had on use of the ARPA dollars, and the number one issue that we received comments on was broadband expansion. So it's consistent with that. Supervisor Lemmer.
And then is this the payments made after the work is done or upfront?
It is a reimbursement program. In there, right, Mike? We deliberately inserted that language this time because we have gone through excruciating negotiations with Frontier. They wanted money up front, and we have said that no, we don't provide money up front. We provide money when the work is done. So it is a reimbursement program, which has been our past practice. And it's clear, therefore not negotiable. So any questions? And again, this deals with six townships and pretty much fills in the voids in those 6 townships and parts of 2 others. And it deals with approximately a little under a third of the identified un- and underserved areas in the county.
The actual expenditure categories have changed. This federal government changes those. So if you want to make it correct, 5.16 and 5.17 are now 5.19, 5.20, 5.21, but 6.1 has stayed the same. So then you've covered every base for broadband, because the ones that are used to be those are now water and sewer private wells. So we want to make sure we got it. Thanks.
So Mike, you'll make that change. So what are any other questions? Gary, anything?
I just was going to add that there's only 42 million this time, which that seems a little odd to say, but compared to previous broadband pools of money, this is a relatively small amount of money. Although the resolution is for $100 per passing up to, it's about 5,000, close to 5,000 passings. It's unlikely that all 5 of these projects are going to get funded.
It is, if I were a betting person, if we got 1 or 2, it'd be wonderful.
I think that would be a fair statement. Yeah.
There was $125 million available last year. There was 500 plus million of requests. Chair Gibbs.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution. Yeah, let me get the number. 63-23 and move to the full board with the corrections of the identified numbers that correlate to the ARPA funding.
Is there a second? Supervisor Lemmer seconds. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll go back to the salaries for county board supervisors for 2024 and 25. Who's going to take the lead? It was This came out of the executive committee recommendation last week, and basically a 3% increase per year for the members, and an increase in the subsidy for the committee chairs to $1,200 and vice chairs to $400 above that. That was the recommendation. The fiscal note is there. Chair Gibbs.
So I'm confused. Where do these numbers? How did it share? And I'm just questioning. I thought the chair of a standing committee would be 1,200 above the board member. Well, that's not 5,656, and 1,200 is not 7,201. So I'm not sure how that number got to be 7,201. And then 56 would, and the.
It looks like there was a typo and it should be 6,056 versus 5656. But even then, wouldn't
Well,
be.
it should be 6856 is what, if you add 1,200 to the 56, it should be 58, or 6856.
Okay.
So it's $400 higher. And the same is true on the vice chair salaries. It shows 6,401, and it should be 400 on, it should be 6,056.
You're saying this should be 6.
That's, if, so I'm not sure how we got to those numbers.
You know, Kim?
I think I sent the initial math. So am I right on the effective salaries for 1/9 of 25 that those would be correct? That the 6181 for board members is the 3% in the second year, and then I added 1,200. It just looks like the chair of the standing committee in 2024 is inaccurate. Is that?
No, I believe that the county board member's salary is inaccurate.
What was it in 20? What is it this year in 23?
What is it?
I'd have to look.
We're checking.
Well, we've got to figure out what 2023.
The Code of Ordinances number, or chapter 2.
Is
56.
Is that including possibly the $30? No.
What are we amending?
In looking at the draft resolution, and again, this is from administration's files, but it looks like 5656 was the board member salary in 22. Then in 23, it would have gone to 5826. I don't know if 5826. Again, this is just according to the resolution that I'm pulling up. That was a draft that I have in my file, so I don't know if that was actually adopted. Yeah, if Kim's got the ones that's passed, that's probably the best.
For 2023, a board member's salary is $58.26.
75 on top of that for.
Should be, is that what you come up with?
I'm not doing, I was.
So my calculations are that the rate for would be, the salary would be 6,001.
It looks like the only thing that's wrong is the board member. The board member one should read 5826. And then,
No, the board member one should read 6,001.
oh, correct. 6,001, and then the other numbers are correct. You're right.
And so somebody will have to go back and revise the fiscal note or just check the fiscal note. But that was the intent of the motion at executive committee. Are there any questions relative to that?
2025 numbers up for it.
Yes. Supervisor Lemmer.
Looks like the only number that's incorrect would be the for board member salary.
Yes.
Can you just give a quick little history on how does this compare to previous discussions on board salary? Is it standard to give a 3%?
There have been years where there's been no increases there have been times where we've tied it into what the employees get. This is one of those where we tied it into basically what the rate was for employees. Kurt?
I think there was a significant period of time when the board chose not to raise the salaries, and then there was several years ago we actually asked the clerk to go out and do a polling of all of the counties, and the result was a variety of different pay ranges, different ideas. Some counties pay a per diem per meeting. Some pay fixed salary. Some, and the thought was we adjusted it at that point once we did that polling to the numbers, and then said we didn't want to fall behind in the future. So they historically, in the last several times, have tied it to whatever the employees were receiving.
Mike?
Just for a little bit more context and history, we actually have an ordinance and a rule in place that says the initial resolution that the board or this committee considers regarding setting salaries for the next term starts with the assumption that there will be a 3% increase. Of course, this committee or the board could change that, and it has in the past, and at certain times it hasn't. But this proposed resolution is consistent with that ordinance.
Any other discussion? Not, what are your wishes? What are your wishes? What are your wishes? If I don't have them, Chair Gibbs.
Well, the other thing that was changed that was recommended by the executive committee was an increase in the salary from, I think it was $800 for the chairman of the standing committees to $1,200, and then the vice chairs went from $200 to $400 in recognition of the amount of additional work. It was unanimous at the executive committee, and so therefore I'll make a motion to approve the salary increases and the adjustments to the standing committee chairs and vice chairs, and move it to the full board for discussion.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Or third by Supervisor Marshall. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of, that was reflecting the change, the correction to the 6,001. To both, okay. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries, but not unanimously. All right, our next meeting is on the 8th. Supervisor Marshall cannot be there, but we will be dealing with the budget and potentially claims and a few other items. Next item is, are there any other announcements? Otherwise, the motion to adjourn is in order. Moved by Supervisor Hart. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Lemmer. All those in favor of adjourning will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you.